Welcome everyone to the Net Zero Innovation Portfolio Engagement event. My name is Jenny McDonald from KTN, and I'm hosting today's event on behalf of the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, ably assisted by my colleagues Poonam and Kira. Now, before we get started with today's event, I just wanted to cover a few items to make sure you get the most out of the event. So first of all, there will be opportunities for you to ask questions during today's event. We're live streaming the event through to YouTube, so please type your questions into the chat box on YouTube, and my colleague Poonam will pass those over to me so that I can put them to our speakers and our panelists. Now, in my opinion, there's no substitute for a live event in terms of networking, the people that you bump into in the coffee queue, and the connections that you make. But we've all got very good at doing these virtual events. So please do also take the opportunity to network with the other people on YouTube with you. Pop your name and organisation into the chat box to introduce yourself, and maybe a couple of sentences about your interest in the Net Zero Innovation Programme. The other thing to say as well, we have over 1,400 people registered for today's event, so hopefully you will make a good connection from the event. Lastly, the event is being recorded, so you're welcome to take notes, but you will be sent a link after today's event so that you can watch it again and also share it with colleagues. We hope you will find it a useful and engaging event. Next slide. So now just looking at the agenda, we will be opening in a moment with our ministerial address, our keynote address from the Minister of State for Energy, Clean Growth and Climate Change, Anne-Marie Trevelyan. And then we will have a presentation from BEIS on the new £1 billion Net Zero Innovation Portfolio. And Mark Taylor and Matthew Bilson will be talking about the programme, some of the priority areas within the programme, just to give you a flavour of what's to come over the next 4 years. We will then have a short Q&A session. So that will be your opportunity to put questions to Mark and Matthew about the programme. What I would say is please do type in your questions as you think of them. Don't wait for the Q&A session. And then that gives Poonam a chance to copy it back over to me so that I'm ready to put those questions for you to Mark and Matthew. We then thought it'd be quite interesting to hear from some of the companies that were funded in the previous BEIS' previous Energy Innovation Programme. And we have Tata Chemicals and Piccolo that will be talking about the technologies that they developed with that funding, and also the experience of working with BEIS, of being funded by BEIS through the programme. And then finally, we're going to wrap everything up with a panel discussion. We have an expert group of distinguished invites that we've invited along to give their view on the question, what is the most exciting opportunities for driving growth and innovation in UK clean technology? And we have with us Ileana Portugues from National Grid, Damatha Adhikari from BEIS, Jojo Hubbard from Electron, and Mike Thompson for the Committee on Climate Change, who will all give their perspective on that question. But then we will open it up to you guys as well, so you can put questions to the panelists and also give comments on your view on that question as well. So as I say, I hope this will be a really useful and engaging event, and you'll learn a lot about the new programme, which, if you've seen already on the website, has 10 great priority areas that will cover all sorts of different technologies and sectors to help us move towards our net zero goal. So I'll just check now to see if the Minister has arrived. Apologies for the slight delay here. I think in the interests of time, what we'll do is start with our introduction to the Net Zero Innovation Programme from Mark and Matthew, and then we can always pop back when the Minister arrives to hear her views as well. So as I say, our next presentation is from about BEIS' £1 billion innovation programme, the Net Zero Innovation Portfolio. And we have two speakers. Dr. Mark Taylor is the Deputy Director for Energy Innovation at BEIS, and also Matthew Bilson is the Deputy Director for Energy Innovation Strategy. And they're going to present to you some of the priority areas within the new programme and the aims of the fund. So I'm going to hand over now to Mark Taylor.
Good morning, everyone. Apologies, you're starting with me rather than the Minister. My name is Mark Taylor. I'm delighted to be here to tell you about our new Net Zero Innovation Portfolio, which we shorten to NZIP. And my colleague Matthew Bilson will join us a bit later on, and he will tell you a bit more detail about the side of the portfolio that he runs. So roughly, we run a 50-50 split of the portfolio. So I'm now going to start by giving you some background. So these are the BEIS priorities. So these are the department's priorities coming into 2021. Number one, of course, is fighting coronavirus, which we've obviously been having a very major playing a very major part in developing the solution for tackling the virus, particularly on the vaccines. But we also are key and looking at enterprise, particularly around creating jobs and investment in the UK. And then the final two are particularly focused on our programme. So that's on delivering net zero and then on delivering innovation to achieve net zero. Now, of course, the bottom two we see as linked. So in developing solutions for net zero via innovation, we'll be seeking to develop companies and achieve enterprise. Now, to set the context of why this programme is £1 billion, that is because you may remember 2 years ago, we had a target of achieving 80% reduction in emissions from 1990 levels by 2050. We now have a target of achieving net zero by 2050. And indeed, we now have a 78% target by 2035. So we've actually moved the target forward 15 years. And this presents a major challenge for industry and ourselves to deliver solutions in a much shorter time frame. So last autumn, hopefully you will have seen the Prime Minister's 10-point plan. I would draw your attention particularly to point 10, which is where our programme sits as a major priority. But you will see, as we explain a bit more how the portfolio is laid out, we're actually contributing to every single other point of the 10-point plan. So those points include 40 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030, 5 gigawatts of hydrogen production, low carbon hydrogen production by 2030, developing advanced nuclear solutions, and deploying carbon capture. So all of those areas we'll be contributing to. And I'll speak a bit later on about the particular focuses of the portfolio that I'm working on, and then Matthew will give more detail on his side. So I want to give you an idea first as to what we've been doing for the last 5 years. So the predecessor programme was £505 million programme. We called it the Energy Innovation Programme, or EIP, and that ran from 2015 and is just finishing up now. We ran over 70 programs across a very wide range of technologies, many of which are now going into deployment funds, such as the CCS Implementation Fund, which is going through at the moment, or the Net Zero Hydrogen Fund, which will be launching later this year. So for us, it's absolutely fantastic that many of the technologies that we've developed in our innovation portfolio are now going into deployment schemes and starting to enter the market. But I would draw your attention to a few two world firsts and a UK first. So the world's first cryogenic battery is being built up in Manchester at the moment. That's been funded by our innovation program, and we've also supported the development of the technology, and it's fantastic to see the first one being built at the moment. The second one I draw your attention to is the UK's first carbon capture plant. This is capturing 40,000 tons of CO2, which will be used to make medical grade sodium bicarbonate. And I'm absolutely delighted that Ladan is here from Tata Chemicals, and she's going to tell you all about it in a following presentation. And then finally, the world's largest vehicle to grid trial. So this is a trial of using EV batteries to help balance the grid, so both taking charge from the grid and giving charge back, depending on how the needs of the grid are. And this is particularly important in the context of the rollout of large-scale rollout of EVs throughout the country, and particularly with the increasing volume of renewable power supply we have from offshore wind and solar. So being able to manage all that, this world first is a critical solution. And then I'm going to give you an idea of a slightly different program. This is a very much a coordination role for BEIS. So we had about 40 companies working on this, and this is the High4Heat program. And the goal of the High4Heat program was to establish if it was technically feasible and safe to use hydrogen for domestic heat. So hydrogen, as compared to methane, produces no emissions. So methane, when you burn methane, get carbon dioxide and hydrogen, and if you're not careful, you get some NOx. When you burn hydrogen, you just get water, and again, if you're not careful, you get some NOx. But it turns out in our program we've proven that we can actually produce less NOx than with methane. Our goal at the start was to find out if it was technically feasible, and we were starting in 2017, and we had no appliances, we had no hydrogen standards, and we had no safety case. So over the last 4 years, we've developed appliances, we've developed boilers, cookers, and fires, and these are all being certified. We've developed BSI standards for the development of those appliances, and we've also developed a safety work around how those appliances can be used in the home and how the home can be kept safe. And indeed, I'm delighted to say that we've been very successful in this, and later this month we'll be opening what we're calling the High House, which is up in Gateshead, which are 2 homes filled with these hydrogen appliances, and you'll be able to go and see them in due course. Indeed, the Minister should be going next week, I do hope. So these are really exciting developments, and it just shows you what our program was about. So we wanted an additional option for decarbonising domestic heat, and through our program we've been able to create a new option to go alongside heat pumps, so the UK can make the best decision for decarbonising heat. So now I'm going to give you a bit of a background to the Net Zero Innovation portfolio, just to give you an idea how it was conceived. So we took a whole system approach in developing the business case to take to Treasury and to take through our ministers. We looked at the whole system and what we need to do across the system. So we were very much focused on achieving a net zero system by 2050, rather than looking at particular individual technologies. So we were looking to see how they all fitted together in developing the program. And when we developed that program, we then focused on not only the technologies, but also the business models, what type of business models needed to happen, and particularly what type of innovation need to happen in the consumer space. Because most importantly, in developing new technology, it's all very well having technology, but if it's difficult to use or difficult to adopt, it won't get adapted at the scale needed. And we really need to make sure that we're focused on developing solutions that consumers can use and indeed will use to help us achieve our targets. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about my side of the portfolio, and then I'll pass to Matthew in a moment for the second side. So my areas are bioenergy, industry, advanced CCUS, hydrogen, and greenhouse gas removal. I'll actually start at the bottom of the page with greenhouse gas removal. So that is a new program that is not an area we looked at under the previous portfolio, and that gives you an idea of how we've needed to respond to the changing targets. So greenhouse gas removal, which includes technologies like direct air capture or CO2 removal from seawater, or BECS, so that's bioenergy and carbon capture, so basically looking for negative emissions. This is a response to the increased targets of net zero. So this is how we will manage to get to net zero, by achieving negative emissions with GGRs, so that we have something to balance the very, very difficult areas to decarbonize. So it's unlikely that we'll be able to get every single sector of the economy to zero emissions. So the idea is that we'll use greenhouse gas removals to get ourselves to net zero. So that program is already underway. Phase 1 is underway. We're looking to invest £100 million. There'll be £70 million from the Net Zero Innovation portfolio, and then £30 million from UKRI, which is going to do more fundamental and early stage research in this technology, as we see this is absolutely critical for us to achieve our targets long term. I'll then work my way up. So on hydrogen, hydrogen supply 2, which is looking at next generation technology, looking to drive down the costs of low carbon hydrogen and green hydrogen particularly. That call has launched about 2 weeks ago, so you can go and peruse our website and hopefully give us some strong entries. That program is also looking at developing the Hydrogen for Heat program, adding further developments that we need to get ourselves ready for trials. So the first domestic trials are scheduled up for the H100 program as at the end of next year. So we'll be developing further insight and technology developments that are needed for that trial to be a success. Advanced CCUS. Now, those of you who followed our program will know that we've run CCS programs for many years. We've, in fact, run programs for nearly 10 years on CCS. I'm delighted to say that a lot of that technology is now starting to be deployed in the CCS, under the CCS Implementation Fund, and those industrial clusters are currently going through a selection process, and much of the technology that we've developed over the last 10 years is going to be incorporated into those designs. So this competition is actually focused on the next generation of CCS. So here we're looking to develop solvents and technology that will achieve higher capture rates and lower toxicity and better performance and lower costs. And that competition indeed opened 2 days ago. So you can similarly peruse that on our website and hopefully enter our competition. And then a key focus for us is industry. So our first competition launched quite some time ago. This was on green distilleries. And this is where we're looking at end-to-end solutions to decarbonize distilleries, both whiskey and gin. And I'm delighted to say that has gone very successfully. Phase 1 is complete. And at the moment, we are finalizing contracts for phase 2, where we start building demonstrations for a number of very, very exciting projects that will decarbonize distilleries in the UK. And we hope that will be an inspiration to other industries and indeed an inspiration to the rest of the world. Further competitions that are imminent in that area are industrial fuel switching across sectors, so a follow-up to our industrial fuel switching competition that we ran under the last portfolio. This one is going to be considerably larger and focused on, as well as hydrogen, we'll focus on electrification and also alternative fuels, so looking at trying to reuse bio stocks or bio waste, etc., to try and reduce emissions from industry. And then finally, on the top, we have a bioenergy portfolio. If you read the CCC reports, you'll see that bioenergy is a key component in us achieving net zero. And we've started this program. The first program we've done is dealing with the feedstocks challenge. There's not enough biomass feedstocks being developed in the UK. So our first innovation program there is focused on developing that, and that competition is also progressing well, and I will hopefully be signing contracts for phase 1 very shortly. Further programs to follow in that area, we expect to be focused on advanced gasification technology, and this is where we were looking to exploit gasification of either waste or biomass and use that as an effective fuel. So I will now pass you to Matthew Bilson, my colleague, and he will introduce you to the other half of the portfolio. Matthew.
Actually, I'm afraid I just have to interrupt you there. I do apologise, Matthew, if you don't mind waiting just for 5 minutes. The Minister has now arrived, so I'm going to, without further delay, hand over to the Minister of State for Energy, Clean Growth and Climate Change, Anne-Marie Trevelyan.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Is there an irony, perhaps, to the fact that as we're discussing unleashing innovation, if somebody could help me unleash the perfect Wi-Fi innovation in the House of Commons, that would be a fantastic start. Apologies for the delay in being able to join you today. It's a real pleasure to be formally opening the event. This is an event I've been looking forward to for some time. And to the only point, I am also very excited to be going to visit the hydrogen houses next week. I'm going to discover if it's as easy to fry an egg on hydrogen as it is on anything else. So really excited to be here. And following on from the UK hosting the leaders of the G7 in Cornwall last month, and as we prepare to host the COP26 Climate Summit this November in Glasgow, we have a historic opportunity to build the momentum needed to make real and lasting change happen. The government's leading the way, proposing a world-leading target which would reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 78% by 2035 compared to 1990 levels. However, to achieve net zero by 2050, we need to facilitate delivery of the UK's net zero commitments, reduce costs of new technologies and the future energy infrastructure. And no single technology will achieve this. Innovation is essential to developing those green technologies needed to tackle climate change, and we are committed to unleashing innovation in order to deliver net zero. So as the world recovers from the impacts of the coronavirus pandemic, a key focus around the world will be building back better and tackling the climate change challenge. The UK's innovation needs are wide and across the whole energy system. Net zero will require change from all parts of the UK and all sectors of the economy. And with the future energy system, it will continue to evolve. A wide-ranging portfolio of innovations will be needed to address this, and to adopting a whole system approach, as you were hearing, will help to identify risks, opportunities, and adaptations which might otherwise be missed. This is why we doubled our previous BEIS innovation programme for £505 million to £1 billion. And this is in addition to our investments to support fundamental R&D across our universities. Announced in the Prime Minister's 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution last year, the Net Zero Innovation Portfolio, or NZIP for short, is a £1 billion fund to accelerate the commercialisation of low carbon technologies, systems and business models in power, in buildings and in industry. The portfolio will decrease the cost of decarbonisation and set the UK on the path to a low carbon future. It will create world-leading industries and new green jobs, invest in our regions and help make the UK a science and innovation superpower. With funding available for projects right across Great Britain and Northern Ireland and competitions launching throughout this year and ahead, we will be able to fulfil our net zero commitment by investing in bold new approaches and products, benefiting you and your businesses as we continue to push that global clean growth lead. You will hear firsthand today how our funding has already supported exciting new technologies and the impact that this has had on the businesses we have been working with. Amongst other success stories, if you've heard, we've seen the development of the world's first hydrogen-ready boiler through our £20 million High4Heat programme and our £10 million investment for Highview Power's cutting-edge electricity storage facility in Greater Manchester in the world's first commercial liquid air battery project, creating 200 jobs and helping better harness green energy generated by UK renewables. We've also supported more than 135 companies through the Energy Entrepreneurs Fund and leveraged over £100 million in private funding. These disruptive innovations are still attracting further investment with the potential to make significant energy savings. Because innovation like this is critical to our future, critical to meeting our 2050 target, and critical to driving the UK's green economy recovery. We are already powering ahead and realising the ambitious commitments set out in our 10-point plan, covering 10 key priorities ranging from CCUS and smart systems to nuclear, renewables and green finance. The NZIP is already having an immediate positive impact on clean growth companies. And there is an urgent need to invest in this innovation now. Since the 10-point plan, we have already announced how we will spend more than a quarter of this funding with competitions launched across 8 of the priority areas. This includes the first phase of a £100 million investment in greenhouse gas removals and direct air capture competition, 68 million funding to support first-of-a-kind longer duration energy storage, up to 20 million of funding to develop world-leading floating offshore wind capabilities, and a 4 million UK-wide programme for the first phase of a biomass feedstocks programme. And that means there are still plenty of opportunities for you to secure a share of this funding as we launch further programmes this year and into 2022. More recently, we announced another major cash injection to drive forward developments in critical technology for carbon capture and the development of low carbon supply of hydrogen. So delivering the ambitious transition to net zero will require a step change in the rate of new technologies and processes being developed and deployed into the market and being adopted by businesses and consumers. We want public investment to catalyse and stimulate substantial private sector investment in innovation. And it's only by working together that globally we will lower our carbon emissions to that net zero challenge that we need to meet. Innovation is a key driver for reducing the cost of clean technologies. Innovation is crucial to transforming the UK energy system overall, and the net zero innovation portfolio is key to making this happen. The UK is hosting COP26 this November, and it will be an unprecedented opportunity to come together as a country to tackle the threat of climate change, spreading ever greater awareness and inspiring action as we go. With UK firms and our world-class innovators, this country's approach to meeting net zero will be firmly in the spotlight. The clean future is within touching distance, but we need action to reach it. So I'm committed to government leading the way, and I look forward to working with all of you in unleashing innovation and creating this future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. We'll now move on to the second part of the introduction to the Net Zero Innovation Programme. And I'd like to introduce Matthew Bilson, who's the Deputy Director for Energy Innovation Strategy, to talk you through that part. Over to you, Matthew.
Thanks very much, and thank you very much to the Minister for taking the time to speak this morning. Do appreciate it. So yes, I broadly manage half the portfolio alongside Mark, who manages the other half. So I'll move on to the final 5 priority areas that we have in the portfolio. So firstly, advanced nuclear. This is to develop and design the next small modular and advanced modular reactors. So our colleagues at UKRI are helping to deliver the SMR competition and programme, and also on advanced modular reactors. So for the next generation, we are developing those. We already have 3 designs that we've supported. And the 10-point plan also committed to the first AMR demonstrator by 2030. The reason why we are interested in AMRs in particular is not just for electricity, but also their ability to possibly help generate hydrogen and high temperature heat. So again, thinking about this system thinking that Mark mentioned is we're not pursuing nuclear for nuclear's sake. It's about how the role that nuclear plays in the future net zero system. The next area is future offshore wind. And again, the emphasis is on future. So we are not seeking to support current generation offshore wind. The industry is already pretty mature. There's very good policy mechanisms to support the deployment of wind. So we're focusing our money down on technologies which might be needed in the years ahead. So first of all, floating offshore wind, that will help us unlock much deeper waters for any future wind deployment. We've already announced £17.5 million competition, which is now closed. We are assessing those applications and we hope to announce the winners of that soon. Separately, we're also working with Ministry of Defence to look at how, with increasing wind farm deployment, how do we make sure that any future deployments at large scale do not interfere too much with the radar systems. And again, we've put some money out for competition that's closed, and we're also assessing applications. And we hope to make more investments, perhaps around the materials for future wind turbines and future wind to support the continued growth of our very competitive sector. Move on to energy storage and flexibility. So again, the strategic context is if we have more and more renewables coming onto the electricity system, we will need a way of storing that electricity and access electricity at times of low demand but high generation. So one aspect there is a £68 million £100 competition we've launched on what we call long duration energy storage. So this is where we're looking for technologies beyond lithium, so beyond the kind of the existing technologies, about how we can store electricity for at least 4 hours. And again, from the systems perspective, we're open to any technologies which can convert that electricity and either use it back as electricity or even use it to generate heat or even other forms of energy storage, such as wet fuels. So that's open now. So if you do have ideas in that, please look on our website, and the closing date is soon in August. We're also thinking about, within the flexibility aspects of the system, what the alternative energy market might look like in the future. So we're looking at if we flex some of the tariffs and underlying policy charges you have in the energy market on consumer bills, would that change the way consumers and indeed suppliers choose to structure their tariffs? So this is a small study at the moment is underway around energy pricing. We are asking for views on this. And this is to help us think about that we may do a large trial in this area to test some of the ideas around tariff and tariff structures and policy charges. And we hope to say a bit more about that in the autumn. Moving on to buildings, again, buildings is a good priority for decarbonisation. We're already doing a lot of activity on heat pumps, and we look to continue some of those activities in the future under this portfolio. I know lots of people in the sector are waiting for the heat and building strategy, and I'm sure that will say a little bit more about our plans in this area going forward. We also know that retrofit is also important. How do we increase the efficiency of homes? And then finally, on what we call disruptive technologies. So all the areas of potential before are quite kind of focused on a specific sort of technology areas or sectors. This particular part of disruptive is open to any technology, any idea which can reduce energy consumption or produce decarbonised energy generation. So again, Energy Entrepreneurs Fund, this is phase 8 of it. Has been one of our most successful funds over the years. We had £11 million competition. We're assessing those applications, and we will announce those soon. And the Clean Growth Fund is a slightly different way for us to support companies. All the funding we've mentioned so far is either grant or contract procurement support. This is venture capital, where we are taking equity stakes in companies, and that has now grown to a £60 million fund. And I think one of the speakers you'll hear from in a minute from Piccolo is benefiting from that fund. So that's just a very quick canter through our areas. If you move to the next slide, Mark. It's just to flag that the policy context is continuous to evolve at a very fast pace. And among two of the strategies that I know people are waiting for are the innovation strategy and separately the net zero strategy, which BEIS will be publishing soon. And then the final slide, Mark, is just to talk about the next steps. So if you do have ideas, do look at the funding opportunities and the competitions. Do contact us. We're always keen to hear for any further ideas that we may not have heard about so far. And also to recognise that our funding and our portfolio is one aspect of the very rich ecosystem we have in the UK. Our partners, such as Ofgem, they're also setting up a very ambitious innovation fund, which is particularly targeting the network and distribution operators. And also to, of course, mention UKRI, which is the government's innovation agency, who continue to support fundamental research at universities, but also support companies to increase productivity and access export markets. So I think me and Mark will stop there, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you to both Mark and Matthew for great presentations there and a great overview of the programme and the priority areas for the next 4 years. We do have some questions that have come in, so I'll start at the top. The first one, I think it's probably for Mark, is what is the target market price for green hydrogen? Or does that... Nice tricky one to get you started.
That is a tricky one. So a lot of people are talking about 2 kilograms, 2 pounds per kilogram. I'm not going to answer that one directly. I think the key thing for us is to make it more economic and reduce the cost of it. There's a particular challenge if you think that we're making hydrogen at the moment. There are two paths to making hydrogen. One is from methane, so cracking methane. It's not going to be possible to make blue hydrogen, as it's called, by that method, cheaper than methane. So what we want to do is make it as cheap as possible, and particularly make the carbon capture as high as possible. And similarly on green hydrogen, what we're looking to do is to drive down the cost of electrolyzers by scaling them up. You will have known about our Gigastock project, which was very successful in helping ITM develop their new plant, which is developing larger modules which will drive down the cost. But yeah, I'm going to sit on the fence on that one. The answer is as cheap as possible. We are also working closely with our policy colleagues to tell them exactly what's technically achievable as they develop hydrogen business models.
I think that's a great answer, Mark. Very good. Next up, we have a question which I'll put to Matthew. From Ezra Karul, could we have an indicative timescale for when calls in the buildings priority area might be announced? And I guess, is that linked to the strategy coming out, or will it be?
It is quite linked, yeah. So broadly, we expect in the autumn.
Autumn, okay, lovely. And the last one again for Matthew. Why do all the NZIP priority areas have pounds next to, you've given a value for the theme, except for the nuclear one? Is there a reason for that? So I've set out the pound figures you see there are for the specific programs we've announced, kind of drawing down from the £1 billion fund we have. Mm-hmm. The reason why we haven't said specifically about nuclear is that's sort of an aligned program. So the 10-point plan announced a £385 million advanced nuclear fund. And again, we haven't yet announced the specifics of how that funding will be drawn down. So don't worry, there is funding behind it, but we haven't publicly kind of indicated the allocations for that. But again, we will be doing that soon. Okay, thank you both very much. And in the interest of time, we did have a few more questions, which we'll save and pass over to Mark and Matthew and try to get back to you after the event. But in the interest of time, thank you both very much. I hope you'll agree, audience, that that's a great programme for the next 4 years and will hopefully help us move towards our net zero goal. So next up, innovation funding really can make a difference to your business in terms of growth. And we're going to hear now from two companies that have been supported by BEIS through the Energy Innovation Programme that ran for the previous 4 years, to give you an idea of the technologies that they've developed, but also what that has done for their businesses. So we're going to start, first of all, with Dr. Ladan Ravanian from Tata Chemicals. And Ladan, if you would like to tell us about your carbon capture and utilisation programme.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Yes, I'll be delighted to do so. So let me just start. Just a bit of context in terms of who we are. So Tata Chemicals is part of the Tata Group. Apologies. Yeah, part of the Tata Group. We have been part of that group since 2005. We have got manufacturing facilities in Cheshire since for over 130 years, 400 employees and turnover of 150 million. We are the sole manufacturer of sodium bicarbonate and sodium carbonate in the UK, and the largest producer of vacuum salt. And we export globally. So we have over 60 countries that we export to regularly. You'll see some of the brands that are regular customers. So what we do is sell a raw material to lots of companies and products that we use every day. So from manufacturing in the glass and detergents to pharmaceuticals, to animal feed, to all sorts of different products in this arena. So the key feature of our existence is raw materials for things that we use every day, as I was mentioning. So for us, manufacturing in a carbon neutral way it has been very, very important, because both of our products, all three of our products, are energy intensive. So that's what we are. But in terms of the carbon capture and utilization demonstration project, this was the program that started in 2019. We got a grant from BEIS, and we have been very successfully working on this project. So I've tried to show the essence of this program in, if you like, this circular way. We have a gas-fired CHP plant on our site, which is a big one. As I said, we are energy intensive, so we need a lot of steam and electricity. And clearly, as a consequence of that, we have got CO2 generation through the stack. So that's that top right, left-hand side. We have also a sodium bicarbonate manufacturing facility on our site, which actually uses CO2 as a raw material. So early on in 3-4 years ago, we decided, well, why is it that we need to actually acquire the CO2, whereby we have actually a generation plant on site that generates CO2. So wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to capture the CO2 and then use it for our manufacturing? So be absolutely, totally sort of self-sufficient and provide net zero sodium bicarbonate in an arena where everybody clearly needs this product. And that is what we have basically we started doing. So it's a 20 million pound project, which we started with a 4.2 million grant from BEIS. So where we got to is, so we've got the carbon capture on the right. You see those two columns, and that is real. That's today. That's what we have built. The trickiness about this process was that clearly we needed to make the CO2, not only capture it, but purify it to the level that was okay for a pharmaceutical grade production. And so that had even more complexity associated with that. So we basically liquefy it and we purify it, we store it. And through that, then we have developed this patented process called EcoCarb, where we generate net zero bicarb. And you see the picture of the plant down there. And then therefore, then that net zero production gives us the net zero bicarb that everybody needs for applications such as hemodialysis and things like that, which are the kind of grades that we are able to export globally because of the very high purity that we make it to. So in terms of the challenges for our plant, so it was two things. One was the capture side, which was so clearly important, but also the purification side. So we went with a Pentair Union advanced Amine technology. And for people who are not familiar with carbon capture, it is basically you'll get the flue from the gas-fired CHP, but it's very weak. It's about 5% CO2 in there, and you need to concentrate it to 100%, and that's what the capture process involves, using a loop of amine. But then beyond that, we obviously had to go much further and be able to purify it and prove to ourselves that indeed it is suitable for manufacturing a pharmaceutical grade product. So where we are delighted. It is the first industrial scale CCU plant. It is big because our gas is quite weak. So as you saw those pictures, it is a serious kind of project. This is and it's taken us 2.5 years. It will capture 400,000 tonnes of CO2, which is 11% of our site emissions. And what we really liked about this whole idea was that you're not only capturing it, but you're using it for something that we really need. So it's, as I said, this circular process was very attractive to us, and it's indeed what we're going to do. In terms of the benefits, I think that working with BEIS and how, what benefits it's given us as a company, it's really twofold. One is, of course, the funding is always helpful in the return on investment. Without the BEIS funding, wouldn't have been sufficient for us to go ahead with this project. So we are delighted to have had the cash to be able to do that. But I guess the softer issue is always the fact that the government is supporting a program means that the shareholder is assured that it is a robust project and it is a good thing to do. So there's a softer issue as well as the funding issue that helps, and indeed that's what we have found. So as I said, I mentioned, so this is giving us the first, we believe, net zero sodium bicarbonate in the world, and we are delighted that a couple of months ago we were awarded the patent for it. The project is still, well, it is completed from a sort of construction point of view. We are commissioning it, so it's exciting times for us. But success in this phase of the program means that two things really. One is we have already started thinking about the second phase, so that's wonderful because these things are sort of, if you like, modular in some ways. But also it means that we can go forward with further expansions in our sodium bicarbonate manufacturing for pharmaceuticals for export, which is again another wonderful thing for us. So I'm just going to finish off with showing you some pictures of our shiny new plant, which we are very proud of. So as you see the stripper and the absorber on the right-hand side, but it's on the left-hand side, but there's still a huge amount of, if you like, kit involved in all of the processes that I mentioned. So as I say, we're in commissioning phase, and we were hoping that we will get our first CO2 in the autumn and go forward beyond that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ladan. That was great. A great project to see, because I helped with the promotion of that competition. So it's lovely to satisfying to see that it's come out so well. We're going to move on now to our next case study speaker. And we have James Johnston, who's the CEO and co-founder of Piccolo. He's going to talk about the project that they developed through the Flex Exchange competition. So over to you, James. I think you're on mute.
Hi, everyone. I'm James Johnston. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Piccolo. We are a London-based startup founded in 2013, and we've received support through the EIP, and as I will get on to, one of the first recipients of investment from the Clean Growth Fund. And I'm going to talk through today our journey, who we are, and why BEIS has been so important in this journey. So, as we all know and are very excited by, there's a rapidly changing energy system. There's a lot of new technology being connected to the grid, electric vehicles, as I've focused on here, but obviously renewable energy and soon electric heat as well. What is not really in focus, or what people are not really aware of so much, is the huge impact that this is going to have on the grid. And the different operating models that will need to be deployed in order for the grid to effectively maintain this rapid pace towards net zero. In order to connect all of this new technology, fundamentally the energy system needs a lot more flexibility. And what flexibility is a little bit of a confusing topic, but effectively it's changing consumption and generation patterns. So you can either balance the grid or maintain the network within its operating limits. And flexible devices is a collection of different types of devices, including batteries, EV smart chargers, demand-side response on industrial plants like Tata Chemicals, and also traditional thermal generation. Now, where we fit in to all of this is we are a marketplace, which, as you can probably understand, we match together the sellers of flexibility, those companies that are operating and managing the growing fleet of flexible devices, and we match them to the buyers of flexibility. These are the companies that own and operate the grid and keep the lights on. Now, in terms of some of our metrics so far, from a standing start in 2019, we have enabled £47 million of local flexibility contracts to be awarded. Delving into it a little bit more, to be very clear, this is a market which did not exist more than 3 years ago. In our first year, it was £500,000 a contract. Last year, just over £14 million, and this year, so far, over £32 million. This is a market we forecast to be worth over £2 billion per annum in value in a net zero world. So in the UK, so this is a very important and exciting area, and we're very pleased to be one of the pioneers in making this happen. Moreover, it's all about the ecosystem that is being developed, and we're proud that we can play a role in leveling the playing field, not just between different types of organizations, from the incumbent energy companies to new entrants, but also level playing field between different technologies, whether that is traditional thermal generation, which plays an important role in balancing the grid, to the new emerging electric vehicle charging space, and everything in between. So we have received quite a bit of support from BEIS over the years, and to say that this has been essential is underplaying it. It's been a really important part in our business, and as you can probably tell, we work in a very complex, regulated environment. So having the backing and support of the government is important in that. So breaking that support down into sort of two phases. The first phase which is the innovation funding. We've been lucky to receive Energy Entrepreneurs Fund money to really help kickstart the business. When the risk is very large, both in terms of the product risk, because we're building this out for the first time, but also the market risk. There isn't a sort of proven opportunity out there. That's where the innovation funding is really helpful for companies like ourselves, and Energy Entrepreneurs Fund is really been an important pillar in the early years of the business. More recently and currently, we're part of another innovation program called the Flex Exchange Demonstrator. Now, this is a little bit more specific to our domain, and it's helped us to grow a different product offering on top of our platform, which is really important. Now, the second type of support is venture capital. And once you have sort of de-risked the proposition, you've got hopefully good results off of those pilots, then what we need is growth capital. Now, there's still quite a bit of risk involved here, so it's not possible to go to the bank for this type of money, and it's very appropriate that sort of that venture capital funding is available. And we're very pleased to be the first recipient of funds from the new investment fund, Clean Growth Fund, which we received earlier this year. So £2.5 million as part of a wider 4.7 million investment, which includes Mott MacDonald Ventures and the Green Angel Syndicate as well. So conclusion, hopefully, well, first of all, you might have learned a few things about the sort of inner workings of the energy system and the key role that flexibility is going to play in that. And then secondly, hopefully I've given you a bit of an idea that how important that funding streams and generally the support we've received through various different mechanisms has been really important for our journey. So thank you, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you very much, James, and Ladan as well. They were great innovation projects. So we don't have time for questions, unfortunately, because we're a little bit behind now. But we really do appreciate you sharing your projects and the benefit that the funding brought to your companies as well. So we're now going to move on to the last set part of today's event. As we've heard, there's a need for innovative, low carbon technologies for homes, for businesses, for heavy industry, to help us to continue our journey towards net zero. So we've assembled a group of energy experts who are going to just give us their perspective around what are the most exciting opportunities for driving that growth and innovation in UK clean tech. And I'm very pleased to say that we have with us Damitha Adhikari, who is the Director for Climate Science and Energy Innovation at BEIS. We have Jojo Hubbard, who is the CEO at Electron, one of the first companies to harness blockchain for energy trading and energy platforms. Mike Thompson, who is the Chief Economist at the Committee on Climate Change, and Ileana Portugues, who's Head of Disruptive Innovation at National Grid. So each panellist is going to give their 5 minutes of their perspective on the discussion topic, and then we'll open it up to the floor and you can put questions to our panellists and continue the discussion. So I'd like to hand over, first of all, to Damitha.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Very good morning to all of you. Great to be here. You heard some great presentations which covers quite wide-ranging aspects related to the net zero innovation question, and the question we've been asked is quite a complex one as well. So I'll try to give a straight answer, but the simplest answer is that opportunities lie in all across the economy when it comes to innovation, and especially if you think about growth. I will try to qualify that very quickly as to why I say that, but perhaps then identify two sectors which will probably bring most opportunities in terms of innovation as well as growth. So if you look at UK's journey towards decarbonisation, we have now reduced close to 50% of our 1990 emissions. And if we divide the economic activity into 5 sectors, the achievement that we have already made is based on specifically 3 sectors: power, industry and business, land use and natural environment. And those savings, the progress is based on a number of specific policies and of course supported by energy efficiency as well. So the easier stuff, we could look at it, has been done, and the next half is going to be really, really challenging. And if we look back, perhaps in 2019 carbon emissions landscape, we can see that about a quarter of the emissions come from transport sector, another quarter coming from businesses and industry, and the other half split equally between power and homes and land use and natural resources. So to achieve net zero, we need to reduce carbon emissions from all those 5 sectors as much as possible. And on top of that, to account for the remainder, we need to have mechanisms, processes, solutions to reduce carbon from the atmosphere artificially, one way or the other. It could be through natural resources, natural mechanisms, or it could be, as Mark earlier talked about, engineered solutions. So that's why I say that the opportunities lie, and they are quite exciting across the whole economy. But if we delve a little bit too into the success and then what the challenge next is, that is a steep reduction of carbon emissions, especially given the target that we've set for ourselves for Carbon Budget 6. And that requires us to decarbonize some sectors very, very rapidly over 14 years to 2035. And that is, to put it in context, just over 750 weeks. And we've spent about 10% of that in the pandemic through 3 different economic closures. So you can see how urgent some of the advances are necessary in some of these sectors. And then if we also look at the analysis, Mike will probably touch on some of these things, and CCC's work show that in the near term, to achieve net zero on a plausible pathway, the major investment needed would be in the power sector, fundamentally because other sectors, when they decarbonize, most of the energy demand will transfer onto the power sector, and then buildings. And later on in the journey towards net zero, we will have to work and invest more on greenhouse gas removals, as well as some in industry. But the largest chunk is in buildings and power. So I would say, if we think about the growth opportunity related to innovation, those are the 2 sectors which probably will bring the most opportunities. But all the other sectors are really, really important, without which we can't achieve net zero. I'll stop there. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Tamitha. And now I'll hand over to Jojo Hubbard.
Thanks, Jenny. Can you all hear me? Great. So the exam question is, what are the most exciting opportunities for driving growth and innovation in the UK for net zero? And for me, the answer is flexibility, or customer service arrangements that make them so. Generation-led kind of energy system to this world where you've got all this variable, intermittent renewable generation that's sometimes abundant, sometimes there's sometimes very little of it, and you've got all these distributed, smart, flexible resources that can optimize it. So really, the onus has moved from the top of the system down to the bottom, down to the end users and consumers, and the people essentially providing services to them. What can you do to use more zero marginal cost power? So Electron is actually not a blockchain company, Jenny. We essentially develop local energy markets. So we've developed a software platform that essentially lets a company like a grid utility, for example, set up a series of price signals to DERs that they don't control, and aggregators or consumers or what have you can respond to it. We've been going for 5 years now. We've had quite an interesting journey to that as a business model, but did definitely involve blockchain. I think when we first, and I think it's quite interesting in context of this, talking about kind of innovation funding and learning by doing, because that's really the only way to learn in a space as complex as this. Like, you've got to start kind of touching some of the strings and seeing what quivers on the other end of it. But when we first started Electron, we had that view of how the power system was changing, like everyone else, the kind of top down to bottom up. And it was very, very evident for us that to optimize a distributed system, you needed a series of markets, because only markets can allocate resources across systems so complex, essentially economically and effectively. There's no one person who's omniscient and omnipotent in this kind of net zero grid anymore, and that's what markets are for. So the innovation funding allowed us to do a lot of different experiments around where we could play in it. Originally we were like, are we building a kind of distributed asset registration base to allow people to enter lots of different markets? And innovation funding allowed us to work with some of the utilities to understand some of the opportunities and constraints around that, and then indeed gave us the kind of platform to send some of those kind of recommendations up around what has to change, and I think we were part of the Voices, the pre-energy data task force that kind of launched some of that way. There's an amazingly collaborative industry, and everyone is feeling and sharing the same problems, and these innovation funders also give you a super platform to kind of expose that and try and change some of that. what we found is, okay, so there's this distributed asset register and anyone can sign up to a whole bunch of markets, but you need the markets to exist then. And there were so many missing markets in the system, but no one was ready to go and build them on top of that shared register. So we picked a particularly interesting one, which is the curtailment market. Which is particularly interesting for the UK, because sometimes we've got way too much generation, for example, in Scotland, and we're paying hundreds of millions of pounds a year to turn that off, instead of exposing those price signals, for example, to flexible assets that can use it. So Electron's creating market platforms that essentially allow something like that to happen. We did one of the kind of, I think, biggest, most like ambitious projects on that was also part of that Flex Exchange funding that James mentioned, that brought together a broad church of consortia across network utilities, suppliers, aggregators like standard setters, and some fantastic consultants around that to really trial some of those new models. We got, I think it was a kind of world's first example of real-time physical trading happening at a local level in Orkney, and expanding that out across kind of other regions, particularly in Scotland now. But it's not just like, okay, marketplaces are exciting. It's the kind of business models that markets like that unleash. So now you've got a whole bunch of customers who are sometimes paid to consume free local power. Like, what does that mean for new types of EV ownership models or battery installation tariffs and things like that? So I think a lot of the exciting stuff for me is happening at the edge of the grid. It's happening at the consumer level. It's happening because of flexibility. It's happening because of our abundance and our kind of quickness to adopt all these variable renewable generators. But also in UK, so really, really markets first kind of regulatory regime. It's a really, really discursive and kind of regulatory curious regime. So you can trial some of these new market models faster than almost anywhere else. And we're already doing kind of innovation projects on the back of that in Canada, with London Hydro and Silicon Valley, with Silicon Valley Clean Energy in California, and looking at others across the world. And that's really been because of not only this innovation launchpad, but also the platform for kind of industry-wide reform that enables.
Thank you very much, Jojo. That was really interesting. And next we're going to move on to Mike Thompson for the Committee on Climate Change.
Thank you, Jenny, and good morning, everyone. A real pleasure to be here, and really exciting always to hear from the innovators directly. Great to have you all on the call as well, I think. Let me start by just saying that the Climate Committee really welcomes the NZIP, not just because it's the coolest new acronym in town, but innovation is so important in this journey to net zero. We, as everyone I think probably on this call knows, we've done loads of scenarios looking at how do we get here from net zero, and there are different paths, of course, in there, but they're all really consistent in the fact that they have to deploy technology we know about today, and they have to develop technologies and solutions for the future as well. We've got to deal with the problems today and with the problems of tomorrow in parallel. There's so little wriggle room in this path that you've got to kind of keep all those balls in the air at the same time. So really glad to see this kind of focus on developing options, this focus on bringing things to market that can be deployed at scale in the future as well. I'll also mention one of the scenarios we developed at the Climate Committee for the sixth carbon budget was specifically an innovation scenario. And what we did in that is we really pushed at the innovation program. We said, well, what if we pushed really hard on that and we're really successful, actually? What if we're able to cut the costs of renewable energy a lot? We're able to cut the costs of electrolyzed hydrogen. We're able to make flexibility more effective for joining these up. What if we're able to get synthetic meat products that consumers are really interested in? We're able to get heat pump prices down, et cetera, et cetera. And what we found in doing that was actually, if you do get all of that right, well, you could actually get to net zero not in 2050, but in 2042. So you could bring that date forward by 8 years, and you could do it at the same cost that we think those kind of central pathways would cost to get to 2050. So there's an opportunity here both to cut the costs of what we're doing, but also to potentially expand the boundaries of what we think we can achieve, and maybe go even further than the targets that we've been able to set so far. The other observation I wanted to make is that actually, when we look at what international countries are doing around the world now, there's so much more overlap now with the UK pathways than when we looked, say, 3-5 years ago. We've got a situation now where, if you look at the EU target, the US, Canada, Japan, their targets they've set for 2030, they're very similar to the UK. They're about 40% reductions from today, and all, of course, on the path to net zero in 2050. So we're in this situation now where it's really clear that we're not acting alone. It was clear before that we weren't going to, but it's now kind of written into various laws around the world. And that implies that there is a huge market opportunity here. The things we need to do to deliver net zero, the things that we need to do to grasp the opportunities of a decarbonising world, these are the same things. And so really great that that's kind of recognised, I think, in this programme, and that your question is about both what we need for net zero and what the growth opportunities are. I think increasingly those two things are just the same. And so I think that just kind of demonstrates it's really important, it's really sensible to be focusing on net zero innovation. I'll play the game too and give you a direct answer to the question that you asked. So for me, the most exciting opportunity actually for driving this growth, driving this innovation, it lies with the government, actually. I think the really exciting opportunity is in getting the right net zero strategy in, actually. It's by providing a full policy package so that alongside the kind of push for innovation that comes with this sort of program, we also have the pull that comes from big markets in the future, right? So that means backing the direction of the net zero target, backing the direction of the 6th carbon budget with clear commitments across the economy. We've had some of those in the 10-point plan that was mentioned earlier, but we haven't got them in all areas yet. And some of them, frankly, do need to be a bit more ambitious than what we've got so far. That was a clear finding of the committee's report a couple of weeks ago. And alongside that, we need to be tackling the barriers. I think really great that we heard about the examples on hydrogen trials. We're going to need trials in other areas as well, like HGVs, to be able to get those where they need to be in future. But we also are going to need to tackle barriers around skills, around public engagement, so that we can scale up these solutions once they're there and they're ready for deployment. We're going to need to line up the incentives in all the markets that are out there. I think you look at buildings in particular. If you were to invent a brilliant heat pump at the moment that was a really good kind of consumer-facing proposition, a kind of energy as a service model, perhaps, you couldn't really make it work at the minute because the relative prices of gas and electricity are fighting so hard against you. So we've got to correct that sort of thing in the policy package so that we can create a market for those sorts of solutions. And I guess more broadly, we need to make sure that the market rules are such that the new markets for the new products can be developed. You know, we've got a nice example of that with electricity market reform, where we changed the rules for renewables, and we made them work for the new low carbon option rather than just for the old fossil fuel option. And we've seen the effects of that in terms of the big rollout that we've been able to achieve and the big reductions in costs. So that's my plea. I think it's kind of, as we always say when there's a big step forward, well done to the government. This is a really welcome set of actions that are being taken. Keep going. There's a lot more that needs to be done as well. This gives us a good push. Let's get all the rest of the policy in place to give a good pull as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. And I completely agree. A net zero roadmap to remove some of the uncertainty would be excellent. So we'll move on now to our last panelist, which is Ileana Portugues from National Grid.
Hi, Jenny, and hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. I think it's definitely great to hear everyone's comments this morning. I think the one thing that it all brings to mind, like we've got so many priorities. Normally, you want to focus on 3 to 5. And what this definitely demonstrates is that climate change is potentially the biggest wicked problem the world has ever seen, right? So definitely a lot to be done ahead. So, I mean, I think part of the question, or the way I tried to look at the question and the way I'm going to try and answer it, so as not to repeat everything with the previous panelists and the previous sort of speakers have said today, with whom I completely agree, is from a growth perspective. And I think what's important is that as we transform society into a sort of sustainable, decarbonized society, we can also grow the economy and develop technologies and solutions that serve others and not only the UK. So there's two sides to net zero. Is of course delivering a net zero society within the UK, but also supporting others and growing and supporting the rest of the world. So from that perspective, I think I want to touch on a couple of the priority areas within the Net Zero Innovation Program. And one of them is renewables. So we saw there, I think it was Matthew who spoke about future offshore wind. I think that whilst renewable energy is still is soaring across the world, it is still only providing 25% of the total global energy consumption. So there's a huge opportunity here, not only for wind, but also for tidal, wave, and alternative renewable energy sources, such as solar-based power, to come into play. And I think this is an area where the UK has historically shown very strong technology research and innovation programs. And I think this is somewhere where definitely from a UK growth, there's huge potential. From a supply side, it seems a lot is focusing on the sea and on oceans. And I think this carries with it effectively the industrialization of oceans. So we've also heard of energy islands coming into play to help with the sort of hydrogen creation. And I think there's going to be a huge industrialization of oceans, which we need to manage appropriately. So I do think there's going to be huge opportunities in that space as well. If we just look at the cable market itself of subsea power cables, it's expected to double in the next 15 years, right? Reaching a total asset base of 16 billion pounds worldwide. So I think there's a huge opportunity also there. Looking at the demand side, I couldn't agree more with what Piccolo and Jojo have been talking about. So I think a more dynamic time and location-based energy market is necessary in order to be able to combat the uncertainty that is coming. But one of the things which I also find fascinating, which touches a bit on what Mark mentioned, was waste to energy. So 1/3 of food produced worldwide goes to waste. And when we look at equity on waste, this is important significantly. Not only is this a big issue globally, but in the UK also 10 million tons of food per year go to waste. This equates to, considering the obesity challenge in the UK, to 112 million average British men in weight. So clearly there's not that many British men in the UK, or indeed people in the UK. So that's a lot of people in waste per year. When we look at the carbon emissions that this waste, these 10 million tons produce, that's 25 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions, 5.5% of our entire greenhouse gas emissions in the UK, which equates approximately to 1/4 of private journeys in vehicles across the UK. So significant opportunity there to not only manage waste, but also to reduce the carbon emissions around it and help us deliver more improved renewable and clean energy. I think there are two technologies or two areas that I think are important, touching to some of Mike's points, which underpin I suppose, energy transformation or social transformation into a decarbonized world. And that is quantum technology. I think the potential to use quantum communication and quantum technology to not only develop some of the modeling and support other industries, but also to secure this sort of time, location, digital transformation is definitely really important. And the UK is also really, really strong on that software aspect. So I think this is somewhere where entrepreneurs, innovators, researchers in the UK can really make their mark worldwide. And tied to that is carbon management. So I think we spoke about carbon abatement, carbon capture, direct air capture. I think part of the future is going to be how we are going to transact on carbon, to some of Mike's points on policy changes, carbon taxing, carbon pricing, and how or potentially how carbon will be used as money and will be effectively certified in all future products, and solutions that can help deliver that transformation to a carbon economy, I think, are going to be growing worldwide. So I suppose some insights or developments into some of the areas that we've touched upon today, but definitely want to leave time for questions, so I'll leave it at that. And I know there's not too much time, Jenny, so over to you.
No, that's great. Thank you ever so much. Thank you to all of my panelists for setting the scene, giving us your views on that question. We have had quite a lot of questions come in, so I'm going to start with the first one from Nigel. He's asked, it's imperative we see funding for adaptation. He's asking, in your opinion, is there too much focus on mitigation at the moment? And maybe if we start with Damitha, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Jenny. Good question. Adaptation is really, really important, and we don't have to look far. The recent news, if you look at them, and the risks associated or linked to increased temperatures due to carbon emissions, is a good evidence base for us to worry about. But from my perspective, adaptation is really, really important, and that needs to happen. However, mitigation is also important, and both are time-bound issues. For the first time, we are trying to find solutions on a time-bound fashion, as I mentioned earlier. Adaptation is supported in a number of different ways, and perhaps there is a question to ask whether there is sufficient concentration or focus is there. But mitigation has been something which needed a proactive approach, and as Mike highlighted earlier, in terms of the challenge we face and the changes we need in terms of policy package, for example, requires specific focused effort on mitigation. And that's the reason why this program is actually focusing on mitigation, not adaptation. But wider government's policies, investments cover wide swathes of mitigation-related innovation, R&D, and requirements, in addition to fundamental investments associated with adaptation as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And Ileana, I imagine it must, it obviously must be something that National Grid has to worry about.
Yes, right. So, I mean, I think both are important. I think, there's huge conversations in the research space and the innovation space and the transformation space as to where you focus and you put your efforts in. The challenge is huge. So we need to reduce our carbon emissions 6% every year until 2030. So this is not an easy task, especially when we currently do not have a very clear plan as to how we're going to get there. So clearly, mitigation is vital from a sustainable perspective. Mm-hmm. One also needs to manage the risk and uncertainty that we might not get there, right? It's great to have ambitions. Like I might have huge ambitions, I don't know, to be Prime Minister of Spain, but I'm also pretty certain I might not get there. And therefore I need mitigations from a career perspective as to what I'm going to do, right? And with this, it's the same. And I think we just need to balance things out and continuously monitor the externalities and how things are moving and figuring out where we are putting our investments in. Mm-hmm. So definitely agree with the person who has the question. Both are incredibly important.
And Mike, I saw your hand up there.
Yeah, I was just keen to come in quick. I mean, look, yes is the answer to the question. Absolutely, we need to tackle adaptation as well. If you've been tuning into recent launches, the committee in the last month has launched a big new climate change risk assessment and a new assessment of progress on adapting to climate change. If you listened into those, you'll have heard us talk about adaptation as the Cinderella of climate policy, because it's been under prioritized and under resourced for far too long. And we won't achieve all our other objectives unless we realise that we need to adapt to the changing climate, and we do adapt and we plan for that adaptation. That applies to net zero just as much as anything else, actually. There's a huge amount of carbon locked up in our soils, in our trees, that is at risk as the climate changes. And look, we can't achieve our objective unless we allow for that. We also need to make sure we integrate it into everything else. So that, when we're looking at buildings and making them low carbon, we've got to make sure they don't then start to overheat as well. Look at the extremes we're seeing around the world, and we've seen in Britain. Overheating is a big issue now, and there is a risk if you get that wrong when you're retrofitting homes to be more efficient, lower carbon, that actually you could make that worse instead of better. So we've got to kind of find these synergies. So absolutely, we should also have an adaptation innovation program, but we've got to make sure that we integrate it into our thinking on net zero as well.
That's great, thank you. And I'd like to put the next question to Jojo. So the question is, do members of the panel think that net zero innovation can be deployed in a just manner across the whole of society? I believe they're talking about consumers, but can we also spin that and say whether the innovation funding will be deployed to SMEs as equally as large companies? So Jojo, from your perspective as a CEO and an innovator, how do you think that can be achieved?
If I may take the first part of that question first, and then pick up on the second one. I mean, the nature of innovation means that the R&D and the kind of capex and the machinery cost is kind of more expensive first. So there are going to be types of innovation, like really sexy Teslas, that are adopted by people who have more money first. But the very like the reason that the flexibility market is so cool is the very point of the flexibility market is using the people who have flexible devices more efficiently will drop the cost of running networks for everyone and all consumers. So absolutely, market design should make sure that pushes through. And I've seen also some really interesting programs in terms of getting some kind of flexible devices into lower income housing. Like there shouldn't be a premium on poverty, and there's been some really interesting stuff around how flexibility markets can tackle the poverty premium. In terms of whether innovation goes to big companies and small companies, look, this is really, really, really hard question. I mean, the kind of smaller early stage innovation pots absolutely do go to the SMEs and the startups, and I think UK is really, really good at that. I think there's the kind of famous valley of death where that thing that you just proved works has to now go and get bigger and join up. And I really think the best possible way to do that at the moment is for small companies to team up with larger companies too. I mean, this is still the kind of space, especially when you're touching the network, where you've got huge kind of security requirements, connectivity requirements, and all these kinds of things to link up to these new markets. So I think we're doing a really, really good job of seeding SMEs, and I think culturally we need to make sure that we're kind of growing them as well, and all the kind of people who could work in either of those different sectors as well. The just transition should go right down to new skills and training and who gets to work on these new kind of fun projects.
That's brilliant, thank you. And Davos, from BEIS' point of view, what could you do to ensure SMEs invested in as well as large companies with innovations?
So the answer is it can be, and it already is from a sort of a introverted program perspective. If you look at the statistics, we take great care in designing our interventions to cater for different markets. If you look at Energy Entrepreneurs Fund, James highlighted earlier, and vast majority of the recipients are SMEs, and we call that disruptive innovation, and we want to support that. And that is from a sort of technology push perspective. But if we look at fairer transition and fairer impacts from the work that we are doing, as Jojo highlights, some of the disparities related to pricing, ability to pay sector, for example. How do we generate new processes solutions which will have a sort of ready-made market quickly, which will drive the cost of some of those offers down, so that the whole society benefits? Those kind of indirect impact can be quickly realized through a targeted innovation intervention, set of innovation interventions as we do. So therefore, the answer from me is yes, and we are actually quite conscious of the fact that the impact needs to be fairer.
That's excellent. Thank you all very much. Unfortunately, we could talk for the rest of the morning, but unfortunately I do need to call an end to the event now. So I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone online who's joined us for the event today. I hope you'll agree that the Net Zero Innovation portfolio provides funding for some really key sectors in our move towards net zero and delivers substantial support as well to innovators. We've heard from 2 great case studies for companies that were supported previously and the benefit that has brought to their businesses. And lastly, from our panel, who have shared some great opportunities for growth and innovation in the UK. So I want to say a big thanks to all of our speakers and our panelists for contributing to a great event. Just to wrap up, we will share links with all the registered delegates of the web pages on BEIS government webpage for the NZIP programme itself, and also the competitions that are currently open, so that you're aware of what you can bid into straight away. And if you do have any remaining questions that you would like to put to Mark or Matthew, or more generally around the NZIP programme, then please do use the NZIP email, which my colleague Poonam has popped into the chat box on YouTube. They'd welcome your feedback and contributions, not just for the current programme, but for future funding as well to support innovation. But other than that, thank you all very much for joining us, and I wish you have a lovely day. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, everyone.